Welcome to SCL, the Subject, Composition and Light Photography Podcast. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to SCL, the Subject, Composition and Light Podcast from Rob, from robnunphoto.com. I hope everybody's had a great week since we had the last podcast, and you've enjoyed the weekend, and maybe you're having some nice summer weather where you are. I know here it's been a bit mixed. We've had some nice warm weather, but we've had quite a lot of sort of cloudy weather, and I don't know, it's been a bit odd for late July. Must be global warming, I don't know. Okay, so here we go. We're into podcast 5 now for SCL, and what I'm going to be talking about this week is the usual stuff. So I'll go through a little bit about what I've been doing over the last week or so, post on the blog, and then my main feature is going to be about zoom, and whether you should be using the optical lens zoom on your camera or the zoom that's built into your feet, and what different effects they use can have on how your pictures look. Okay, so SCL, it's a podcast all about my experiences, about learning to become a better photographer, and then sharing some of those ideas with everybody else. If you go to robnunphoto.com, you'll find a post with the links from things I talk about on the podcast, and links to the post that I talk about as well. We've got a group on Flickr, robnunphoto.com, so if you look on the right hand side of the blog, you'll see a link through to that. And please, join the group, get involved in the discussions, post some photos, and just have some fun practicing and perhaps learning a little bit more about taking better images. We've still got a couple of live, we've got the live photo assignment still going, the time one. I've still got one left to do, and we've also got I think I called it a technique challenge, where the idea is to try and take some landscape type pictures, but without any sky in them, to try and avoid the problem of blown out skies and bright stuff, and just to try and get away from our normal sort of composition of having the sky, and the land in our picture, and do something different. Right, so what have I been doing this week? Well, in the last podcast I mentioned the fact that I've been on a photo walk around Monk's Walk, which is a little sort of wooded area round the back of where I live. Maybe I should sort of explain a little bit more about sort of the geography of where I live. Well, I live in Gosport, which is on the south coast of the UK. If you look on the map of the UK, and if you look along the south coast and look for the Isle of Wight, which is like a little diamond, and then go up north to the coastline from the tip, the northerly tip, roughly that's where Gosport is. And Gosport is a small town, and it's traditionally been, I guess you'd call it, a satellite of the Navy base next door. So there's Portsmouth Harbour, which is the main Royal Navy base, if you like, where they have all their warships and things. Obviously, as the Navy's scaled down over the last sort of 20-30 years, the influence of the military in Gosport has diminished greatly, but we've still got some bases here, HMS Sultan, HMS Collingwood, and a lot of Navy people still live here. But near where I live, which is in Elsom, which is near Priddy's Hard and Monk's Walk, it's sort of Gosport is almost like, it's a peninsula, so we have the back end of Portsmouth Harbour comes round the back of Gosport Peninsula and heads into Fareham Creek. And it's where the Navy historically has had their armaments depots for all their ammunition. Just down the road there's a museum called the Explosion Museum, which is in a group of sort of buildings that date back to Henry VIII's time. And I think what they used to do is they used to keep all the gunpowder and shells and rifles, sort of muskets I guess it would have been back there. So it was well away from from where the ships were, so that if there was a chance of a fire and explosion, it wouldn't take out the dockyard, it would just take out Gosport. Great. We also have I'll sort of relate it now. We also have the Navy's fuel depot on this side of the harbour as well, and every year you get a leaflet through the door from the council explaining what will happen if there's a fire at the depot, because if it does explode, there isn't going to be much left. It says make sure if you hear the siren, stay inside, close all windows, and tune into the emergency radio frequencies. But anyway, they've still got a big armaments depot here. It's all sort of top secret. Well, I say top secret. There's lots of signs saying, this area is controlled by the Official Secret Act and keep out and things. And there's these big bunkers. I mean, if you go to Google Earth and look for Gosport and look for Priddy's Hard, you can zoom in. You can see them all anyway. You can see these. I guess they're hardened bunkers against nuclear attack and things like this. But what it does mean is there's an awful lot of green space that's been hasn't been touched for decades and decades. So there's quite a lot of nice wildlife and things. And apparently there's deer around there as well. Now, I didn't know this. Well, sorry, I knew this, but I'd never seen them, and I always took it with a bit of a pinch of salt. I was like, yeah, there can't be any deer around here. I mean, yeah, plenty of hedgehogs, badgers and foxes, but no deer. Deer are quite large, aren't they? But all around this area is a great place to go for a photo walk, because you've got the sort of seascapes of the back of the harbour, and you've got nice little wooded areas, and there's always some nice flowers to take pictures of. And some of it is quite eerie as well, quite sort of deserted. You get the odd dog walk, but there isn't really that many people who go down there. So I went for a walk, I think it was last weekend, and you've just sort of got to picture this. So I'm there. I'm in my shorts and my t-shirt. I've got my camera bag on my back with my tripod. I've got my iPod on, listening to some music or listening to some podcasts, sort of bopping along down this trail, thinking, what am I going to take a picture of today? And I hear this rustling in the undergrowth. And loud rustling. It wasn't like a bird or something. It sounded like a dog or something. So I was like, ooh. So I turned my iPod off and started creeping through the undergrowth, swatting off the millions of mosquitoes you get around there, because it's just literally you're just walking along and they're all landing on your arms and you're swatting them off. And lo and behold, in the distance through the trees, there was this little deer standing there, this little red deer. So I was like, wicked. So I grabbed my camera and I was trying to zoom in on him, but I didn't want to scare him, because I wanted to get some shots. Technically, though, it was really difficult, and there was only really one picture that I was sort of semi-happy with, and you can see that on my photo stream on Flickr, because I was fighting the fact that we were in a wood, so there wasn't much light. I mean, he was way too far away to use a flash, and the flash would have scared him off. My tripod was still in my backpack, and I didn't want to make too many sudden movements and make him run off. So I was at full zoom, 10 times zoom on my Fujifilm, and the little blur warning indicator was flashing away, was on the screen. And every time I took a picture and looked at the review, they were blurred. So it was like, so I opened up the aperture all the way to 3.5. Still they were blurred. So then I had to start clunking up the ISO in order to increase the shutter speed so I could freeze it. And I went all the way up to 800, and I think I ended up at 1600 as well on one of the shots to actually get it. And then I tried to creep a little bit closer, but because we were in woodland, there was loads of deadwood on the floor, and it's cracking and snapping, and he heard me and ran off. So I sort of did a little bit of stalking around to see if I could catch up with this chap or lady, but I couldn't, so that was a bit unfortunate. But at least I know they're there now, and I'm more tempted to go and see if I can get some more shots. During that photo walk, I also took quite a few pictures of trees and attempted to do some black and white conversions on them. I don't think they were that great, because I'm still getting the hang of trying to do black and whites to make them look nice. And anyway, I'm doing a lot more practice with that, trying to convert photos to black and white, because it enables you to really focus on the form of a picture, the subject, the shape, the shadows, without being distracted by the colour. And then what happened the next day? Was it next day, Monday or Tuesday? I was out playing football with my son. What we do is almost every night after school we go down the local recreation park, and we take the football and we have a kick around. And a lot of the time, a lot of his mates will come over as well, and we have organise a game and have a match. And we were playing, and it was great. Really hot day, really hot. We were all sweating, and you got to remember, like, I'm a 36-year-old bloke, and I'm playing football with these 10-year-olds. So it's great fun. You know, they're all really enthusiastic, and then my wife had finished work, and she joined us, you know, to play football as well. So she went in goal for one of the teams, and so I was, you know, showing off a bit, as you do, and I was sprinting to get the ball once, and I think I pulled a hamstring in the back of my leg, and I like fell over, and I was like, oh, injury, and so they're all laughing at me saying, get up, and I was like, I can't. But I was, it was really knacked, really pulled hard, and I sort of hobbled back to the car, and then we went home, and I was like, for the next few days, I sort of hobbling around going, oh, my leg hurts, and they're saying, oh, you're a wuss. But anyway, what that meant was I couldn't really go out and do any more photo walks. I even found it difficult to get in the car and drive with my clutch leg, because it was hurting so much. But, you know, being a bloke, I wasn't going to go to the doctors. So I did a little sort of another macro subject set of pictures, which you can see on the Flickr stream or on the website as well, where I was taking pictures of things using a white background, because previously I'd done with black. And it was really interesting to have a play around with that, because I wasn't using any special lights or anything. I was just using the lights inside the house, some white paper as the background, and then sort of keeping my camera steady. I think I was using some drinks coasters to hold the camera, then using the shutter delay. And what I found out was that it worked very well for darker subjects, not subjects that were very light themselves. I tried to take some pictures of some Wii remote controls, but because they were white in themselves, when I tried to go into Photoshop Elements or Photoshop to do a colour adjustment to make the background really white, so that it would change everything else really white, the white on the controllers blew out and became either too white, and it didn't really work out. But if you fancy doing, you know, some macro subjects like that, and you don't want to build a big soft box or use lots of lights, then with darker subjects, you know, it worked really well. And it was really a case of just setting a custom white balance on the camera, on the white background, placing the object on the paper. I did use one of my homemade sort of reflector thingies to block out direct light from the ceiling light onto some of the shinier objects. Taking the pictures, and then in the photo editing, just going to a a levels or a curves adjustment layer, and then just setting the white point. So I would tell Photoshop Elements or Photoshop, look, this background is white, and you click on it, the background changes to white, and it changes all the colours then of everything else, and then that really makes the background sort of become almost like a studio background. But because the paper I was using was the back of wrapping paper, it was a little bit crinkled, so there was still some shadows on it. So what I then did was I took the dodge tool, which lightens everything up, and then just set the opacity to that to quite low, and then just painted over the areas of the shadows that were still there to get rid of most of them. And it was quite an effective technique. I think worked okay. I did some book reviews this week on the site, 3 in a row, because I couldn't really go out, so have a look at those. And then because I hadn't taken many pictures, I did a little bit more black and white practice, or black and white sepia practice on some of mine and my son's remote control cars, and I did those in the garden. So what I was trying to do was create the painterly effect that I've done before on some of the still lifes by doing a really deep HDR, by taking really underexposed pictures where they're almost black through to just overexposed, to see if I could get that effect. It didn't really come out the way I wanted to. I think they look a bit plain, to be honest, the pictures, but it gave me an opportunity to practice with the black and white adjustments layer feature in Photoshop, just to play around with the sliders. And then I don't know, I just like adding sepia tones to things. I think it just makes the images a little bit warmer. But have a look at them, see what you think, and maybe, you know, have a little bit of a practice yourself. The final post I've done this week since the last podcast was I created some custom Noise Ninja profiles for the Fujifilm S5700 or S700. So if you've got that camera, feel free to download the profiles and load them in. And I'm still a bit unsure whether custom profiles are any better than the auto profiles that it does, but you know, it's worth a go. It's worth a go, and that's on there as well. Okay, main subject for this week is lens zoom or feet zoom. So what we're talking about here is, on almost all the cameras we've got, is there's some sort of optical zoom. So you might have a little point and shoot that's maybe got a 3 or a 4 times optical zoom, a bridge camera or super zoom like my S5700 that's got a 10 times optical zoom, or maybe you've got a digital SLR that's got, you know, you've got a really cool telephoto lens that goes, you know, can do huge zooms. One of the problems with zoom lenses though is that sometimes it encourages us too much to stay in the same place and then use the zoom to zoom in and compose our shots, especially if you're using a tripod, because you know you've got to pick the tripod up, collapse it down and move somewhere else. But what we have to be aware of is that the zoom does distort optically our image. Okay, so what I'm saying is that when you take a picture at wide angle, so you're zoomed all the way out, if you take the same picture, say by walking backward and then zooming all the way in, it will look differently. Because what happens is, at wide angle, optically, what the lens does is it spreads out the picture. So things are seen further apart than they actually are in terms of width, and also in terms of how far away they are from the camera and from each other. Whereas when you're at full zoom, things seem closer together in terms of width and distance as well. If things are, it pulls things closer together. So I know that sounds a bit confusing. I'm a bit confused saying it, but if you think of an example where you're standing on the side of a road and there's a line of parked cars stretching away from you. If you take that picture at wide angle, so you zoomed all the way out, those cars will appear to be further apart in distance than they are in reality. If you were shooting sort of, I think is it 50mm is probably the in an SLR is sort of real life. Whereas if you then walked a long way away and then zoomed in to that same sort of crop of those pictures of cars, all those cars would then appear like they'd moved closer together. That's the optical effect using wide or zoom does. Another example might be say a glade of trees. So you're in a clearing, say, and there's a number of trees in the clearing, and you set your camera up and you have your camera on wide angle and you take the picture. In those pictures the trees will appear further apart than if you took walked backwards, went back sort of 50 feet, set your camera up and then zoomed in on those trees. The zoom would pull in terms of how far away from you are. Obviously they get closer because you're using a zoom, but in terms of from each other as well, they would appear to come together and be closer than they are actually in real life. So it's another example of where we as photographers can make an artistic choice and give us a little bit more control about how we want our pictures to turn out. If we want a wide angle shot where things are all separated and we want definite separation between elements in a picture, then we can use wide angle. But maybe there's situations, say for example that glade picture, where we want the trees to appear closer together because we want maybe a claustrophobic effect. We should walk backwards, move further away, and then use the zoom to zoom in, and vice versa. And it's all about sort of down to that old adage, you become a better photographer by looking at lots of different compositions, and by thinking about this and picking your camera up and walking around and trying different levels of zoom or focal length, I guess you would call it, you end up with sort of different effects as well. So next time you're out and you're taking that sort of shot where you have the opportunity to get up and walk closer or move further away, so you're taking the same picture, the same crop if you like, but at different zooms, try it and see what happens. Where this can be really important though and can affect things is if you're taking pictures of people. Because when you're taking pictures of cars and trees and things, it doesn't really matter if they're like a little bit fatter than they really are, a little bit thinner. But when you're taking pictures of people, all of a sudden that can make a difference, especially when taking pictures of people's faces. Because at wide angle, if you take a portrait of somebody at wide angle, like of their face, what's going to happen is their features are going to appear to be a little bit further apart than they are in reality, and that might not be too pleasant effect. The other side of it is if you're a long way away and you're zooming in, then their features could appear slightly compressed, so that's not great as well. So maybe when you're thinking about taking portraits of people and you're pretty close, think about not using the extremes of your zoom. So don't use wide angle, zoomed all the way out, and don't use zoomed all the way in. Use something in the middle. And again, play around and take it at a number of different zooms, a number of different focal lengths, so you can get the effect that you want, so you don't end up distorting pictures of your better halves or your kids or anything like that. Okay, so I hope that maybe gives you a little bit of food for thought when you go out taking photographs next time, and maybe how you can manipulate your images by trying different zooms to change sort of how close things are in relation to each other. I actually got a couple of questions this week from a chap called Michael. He may have sent the questions from my other podcast that I used to do. I did one specifically about the S5700 and how to use it. But I said, come on over to robnunphoto.com and subscribe to SCL podcast as well. And the questions, I think he's about to buy an S5800, and he was asking whether he should be using rechargeable or alkaline batteries in his camera, because his camera, like the S5700, I think, uses AAs. And my answer to that is, unless you've got loads of money, always use rechargeables, because they last ages, and they're obviously a lot cheaper in the long term. The way I tend to do it, I actually have 3 sets of rechargeable batteries for my camera. So I have 3 sets of 4 AAs, and one is obviously in the camera, and then I have 2 spare ones in my camera bag. I've never ever put a fresh set of batteries in my camera and it run out in the same day, or even the next day. It's normally 2 or 3 times when I've gone out and taken lots of pictures, I then swap to the next set, and then I put the flat ones in the bottom of my camera bag, and when I get home they then go on charge. So go with rechargeables. Get ones that are at least rated at 2000 milliamperes, I think that is, to give you a decent amount of life. They're dirt cheap on Amazon. And go for it and use your rechargeable batteries. He also asked the question about tripods and wanted to know whether they're universal. Camera tripods are. And most of the budget tripods, so ones sort of under £50, that they're all pretty much a similar sort of beast, in the fact that they have a little screw on the top of them, and then you screw your camera onto it, and they'll always be the same size. One of the things it might be worth looking at, though, is if you're thinking about tripod, is getting one with a quick release bracket on the top as well. So what that tends to be is some sort of plate that you screw onto the bottom of your camera that can stay on the bottom of the camera most of the time. And then to put your camera on the tripod, you just put it on the tripod, release a switch or turn a knob, and it clicks onto that plate, and it saves you screwing and unscrewing your camera from the tripod loads of times. Because obviously every time you're doing that, if there's any dirt on the thread or anything, you're going to be wearing away the little thread on the bottom of the camera. When you get to more expensive tripods, when you buy them, they don't actually come with a method for fixing the camera onto the top. You have to buy a separate head, but we're getting into really expensive things there. So, do a little bit more research on Google or the photography websites to get a bit more information. But for most people, a fairly basic tripod, not too big, nice and lightweight, but just get used to using it before you go out in the field. The fact that you've got to make sure all the screws and everything is nice and tight, because you don't want the tripod collapsing with your camera on it, and you don't want it tipping over either. But they're the photographer's best friend, a tripod. Okay, recommending podcasts for this week for further listening. One podcast that I listen to every week is by a chap called Ron Dawson, and it's called F-Stop Beyond, and you can get it at cinematicstudios.podbeam.com. I'll put the link on the website. And in this, Ron interviews photographers of all sorts, and asks them about, their history, how they got into photography, their lives, what inspires them, what advice they have for budding photographers and all this sort of thing. For example, this week he's talked to Scott Bourne from TWIP, and he had a really nice conversation with him all about how he got into it, the different things that these guys do and women do as well, and what advice they've got for the future. And yeah, it's really nice just to listen in almost on a conversation between sort of professional photographers and the sort of things they're interested in, and the advice they've got to give to everybody else. Recommended sites this week would be Deviantart at deviantart.com. Josie recommended this on the Flickr stream. Our group site on Flickr, and I must admit I was a little bit skeptical at first, because it's not just photographers. There's painters, illustrators, digital artists, all sorts of different types of artists on there, and it's definitely got that arty feel to the site. You know, where Flickr tends to be photography, you know, and photos and the technical side of things a lot of the time, DeviantArt is definitely more on the arty side of things. But I would say, yeah, if you fancy it, join. If you don't and upload a few of your images, I know it gave me the opportunity to look back on some of the photographs I've taken over the last sort of 6 months and think, you know, if I was going to print these out and stick them on a wall, you know, which ones would I choose that I would think are a bit arty? You know, a little bit more, a bit like fine art photography perhaps. And it was really interesting looking through and seeing what sort of style maybe I'd developed over the last 6 months of using my S5100 and taking my photography a little bit more seriously. And the other great thing about DeviantArt as well is, you know, browsing through the fantastic images is there. I mean, there's loads of great photography on there, really brilliant photography that's easy to find as well. You don't have to trawl through lots of snapshots. Almost every single photograph I've looked at has, you know, you think, oh, you know, wow, you know, you might not like it, or might not like the style, but you're like, no, this is good stuff. But there's also all the other stuff as well. There is also all the paintings and the digital art as well. So it gives you a slightly different perspective on maybe things that you could apply to your own photography. So, you know, go over to DeviantArt. Thanks for Josie for recommending that. I'm on it now. I'm Scale Speeder, so you can have a look for me. The photographs I've got in my profile, I've got them all on my Flickr stream as well, Flickr photo stream. So, but it's a good opportunity to sort of take those old photographs and just look at them in a new way. A recommended Flickr photo stream to look at this week would be JW Photography. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes. If you just do a search though in Flickr under people for JWL Photography, that's one word. What this guy does is he takes the most brilliant pictures of his kids. Absolutely fantastic. If you ever wanted to know how to take interesting pictures of children, look at his photo stream. He puts his kids in all sorts of really funny situations. He's got great advice about using flash and light in his images, his composition, and they're just great fun to look at. They're just brilliant, really nice photographs. It will make you laugh when you look at them. And you know, with all these recommended Flickr photo streams, add the person as a contact, so that whenever they do some new work, you know, you can see that on Flickr. It will come up on the home screen, and go through and have a look, and it will just be inspirational. Inspirational ways of taking really cool pictures of kids. Yeah, can't really say enough about his photo stream. I really enjoy looking at it. The recommended Flickr group to join or have a look at the group pool would be Vanishing Points, and they're at www.flickr.com/groups/parallax. That's PARALLAX. A bit similar to the Paths group, this one. Obviously the theme is, you know, images where something's disappearing into the distance, whether it be a road, a stream, or a path, or a fence, or anything like that. And it really helps you to understand how leading lines, especially diagonal lines through photographs, make photographs more dynamic, and because they lead your eye through the image. And I think by looking at lots of photographs like these, or photographs in general, it means that when you're out looking around, thinking, what photographs can I take? When you see examples of these lines, maybe you're not in the right position to take the best photograph, but it encourages you to change your composition and walk around and see, all right, can I get this path a real nice diagonal across my frame, so I can have a really cool leading line leading through the picture. So yeah, go over to Vanishing Points and check out the group pool, have a look through the photographs, and obviously pick your favourites and that sort of thing. Just a quick reminder that it's the last few days of the Flickr theme time. I've still got another one to do. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. And there's also the technique challenge over there, which is taking landscape pictures without any sky in them. They don't have to be the countryside. It can be an urban landscape, seascape, whatever you like. But try and take an image without the sky on, whether it be by getting up high and shooting down, or just pointing your camera down slightly, just to try that different perspective, just to try something new. Right, that's it for today. A lot shorter podcast this week, because I was very aware that I droned on for almost an hour last week, and it was a bit much. Hopefully there won't be any distortions to the audio this time. I know last time there was some rather strange garbled bits during the podcast in the first half that I think were due to my antivirus updating itself and doing a quick scan, but I've turned all that off this time to make sure that everything hopefully will run smoothly. If you've got any questions or comments or suggestions for the website, the blog, or the podcast, you can email me. My email is scalespeeder@gmail.com, or go to our Flickr group and start a new thread, or use the comments forms or the contact forms on the blog. And thanks to Everyday Jones with their song Here I Am, which is the music I use for the intro and the outro, and you can find their stuff at podsafeaudio.com. Most importantly, thank you for downloading the podcast and listening, and the comments, and taking part in the forum. Thanks for listening to me, for draining on for sort of the last half hour, and I'll see you on Flickr.